Hello my loves, my name is Hannah and welcome to a definitely improvised and probably quite chaotic video about the Booker Prize. I am not an expert in the Booker Prize, nor have I read the majority of books that have ever been shortlisted or longlisted for the Booker Prize. But nevertheless, I've read some, and I thought today what we could do is go through the backlist of the Booker Prize and just have a chat about what I've read, and whether or not I recommend them. More crucially, probably, actually, whether I remember anything about them. All of this stems from the fact that I offered to do a recommendations video about the Booker backlist a while ago. I said, hey, I could do a recommendation video if you wanted it, because I need to pre-record some content because I will have been in Japan. By the time you're seeing this, I think I will have just got back from Japan. But I wanted to create some content that would just be going up on my channel for while I was away. And I did offer to do a Booker Prize recommendations video, which I have subsequently run out of time to really kind of think carefully about. So instead, I thought we could really test my handle. Now, I am Hannah Lost the Plot for a reason. I love reading, I love books. I almost exclusively forget the entire plots of books after I've read them. I normally remember if I liked something, often don't remember what I liked about it. So I thought what we could do is go through all of the years of the Booker Prize. I've just got the Wikipedia page up on my laptop, and I will just talk you through the books that I have read and what I remember of them. So I've got no idea how this will go. I also don't know off the top of my head, like, roughly how many of the Booker Prize books I've read, so I've got no idea how long this video will be. Could be real short. But I've got the Wikipedia list up here, which is a little bit patchy in terms of, like, I might miss some books, but we'll just go through and see, right? I am trying to be nice to the version of me that is going to have to edit this video together, so I'm probably not going to be making that many cuts, which means things might get a little long-winded, and sorry if they do. But this is me at my most unvarnished. Enjoy. So, I'm using, as I said, the Wikipedia page. Oh, for anyone that, I feel like most people are familiar with the Booker Prize, but in case you're not, it was started in 1969. Its MO is to, here we go. First time she's lost her train of thought. Its MO is to be awarded essentially to the best book written in the English language. In 2014, it slightly changed its audience. So prior to 2014, it was exclusively kind of available to be won by writers from the Commonwealth or the Republic of Ireland. And then in 2014, it kind of broadened its scope to any book that was originally written in English and is published in the UK, including nations that are not Commonwealth nations, which is nice, isn't it? So I figured we'll just dive straight into it and see how we do, shall we? I am not expecting to hit any books in the first few years. So I'm going to scroll through now and see how we do. Right. 1969. Nothing. Okay, so there's lots of names I recognise. Lots of names actually where I have read other books by these authors. Iris Murdoch, Susan Hill, Doris Lessing, V.S. Naipaul. Okay, so we start in 1969, and I have not read anything between 1969 and 1979. So the whole of the 70s, gone. Nothing. I have nothing to say about any of the books in the 70s. If you read them, tell me all about them. 1980 though. Oh God. Okay, so 1980, I read The Winner. The Winner was Rites of Passage by William Golding. And oh, sorry, I do normally put covers on the screen. Editing Hannah in the future, I can guarantee you she's got no time for it. So sorry that there are no covers, but I will link the Wikipedia article down below so you can kind of go through all the titles, because obviously I'm not going to sit here and list every single book that's ever been shortlisted, because that would be a really boring video. I'm just pulling out the ones that I have anything to say about. So in 1980, the winner was The Rites of Passage by William Golding. And all I can tell you about this book is that I DNF'd it when I was about 17. I remember having read The Lord of the Flies and really enjoying it, and then seeing Rites of Passage, I think, in a charity shop and going, hey, well, I'm obviously a fan of this author, I'll pick this book up. And finding it so fucking boring. Now, whether or not this today, Hannah, would feel the same about it, I don't know. It's not a book that I'm particularly interested in revisiting. What can I remember about it? We spent a... Oh my God! No, wait, I have read this book. Oh, I remember nothing about it, but I was definitely confusing it with The Riddle of the Sands. Because I was about to say it's something about boats and spies, but I think that's the Riddle of the Sands by Erskine Chalmers. Oh my goodness, we are starting so well. I've read Rites of Passage by William Golding. It obviously didn't leave much of an impression if I can't remember anything about it, and in fact confused it with a book I really didn't like. So nothing to say about that one. Then in 1981, we've definitely got some things. So in 1981, the winner was Midnight's Children by Salmon Rushy, which is a book that I have read and really liked. I did read it when I was at uni, which, spoiler, over a decade ago. So give me a minute. All I remember is if you've read Salmon Rushy before, it is like classic Rushy. It's magical realism, it's social commentary, particularly around post-colonial narratives, but it follows, I think, the interconnected narratives of this group of children who were all born on the stroke of midnight on some kind of important day. Possibly, was it Indian independence? It could have been Indian independence from the British Empire, I think. But feel free to correct me down below, because I don't remember. But there were basically a number of children that were born like right on the stroke of that happening, whatever that was, and it follows all of their lives. Bit magical realist. I remember really enjoying it. I picked it up after I studied. So I studied the Satanic Verses at uni and really liked that, and then read this one afterwards. But I'm a fan of Rushdie's writing. It's not for everyone, and actually magical realism often doesn't work for me, but it does work for me when he does it. So I feel good about recommending that one. Great. Then 1982. Okay, so the winner in 1982 was Shin La Ark by Thomas Keneally, which I haven't read, but it is on my shelf downstairs and I do have the intention of reading it. I feel like most people will know this by the film title, the film adaptation of Schindler's List. But I mean, it's World War II literature about, I can't remember his first name, Schindler, who managed to sort of save a whole group of Jewish people from the Nazis. I haven't read it though, so I don't know. And I've got nothing else to say about any of the other 1982 books. 1983. Okay, so The Life and Times of Michael Kay by J.M. Coetzee won in 1983. I have read this. It's very hazy. I remember it being about a man called Michael. And for some reason, I think it is set in South Africa. For some reason, I can't remember what the circumstances are, but there's like a mass exodus from the cities. People are having to leave. And Michael is, I think he's a character with possibly some special educational needs or learning disability, but possibly I might be misremembering. But he's certainly a man who struggles quite a lot in his interactions with people. if I remember rightly, but they're all leaving and he's sort of joining this exodus. I don't remember loving it. I don't remember hating it. I could be completely misremembering it. Sorry if I am. But I did read two of the other books that were on the shortlist for this year that actually I do remember enjoying infinitely more than that book. One is a Rushdie book again, so Shame by Salmon Rushy. I feel like this is not spoken about as much as The Satanic Verses or Midnight's Children. I don't know if I enjoyed it as much as the others. Certainly I can't really remember much about the story, but that's not a comment on the book. That's just my brain. But I really like his prose, so I will read anything that Rushdie writes. Having said that, haven't read any of his more recent books, but intend to. Yeah, I remember really liking that one. Probably read it, I was living in London, so maybe 8 or 9 years ago. Then Waterland by Graham Swift, which is a book that I really liked. I do have a video actually on my channel where I read this book. I think it featured in the vlog I did when I went to Gdansk, which I will try and remember to link down below. And this is a kind of sprawling book, which reminds me a little bit of, if you've read Enlightenment by Sarah Perry from this year's Booker Prize long list, it kind of gives me similar vibes in it's like there's a central story that's to do with very specific characters, but then we're branching out quite a lot, and it's set in the Fens, so the Fenlands in England, which are kind of like in going towards East Anglia and Cambridgeshire, very flat, very wet. And it's got stuff about the history of brewing, eels, what else? A mother who does something weird and possibly inexcusable. Am I selling it to you? Oh, I don't even know what the outcome of this video is. Am I trying to make you read the books? Who knows? But yeah, I did really like Waterland by Graham Smith, and he became one of those authors after I read that I thought, oh my goodness, I must go and read more of his books because I really enjoyed that, and then haven't read more of them, but must do. So that was 1983. 1984, it was won by a book that I've never heard of, by an author that I've never heard of. It was Hotel du Lac by Anita Bruckner. But I have read a book from the shortlist. I read Empire of the Sun by J.G. Ballard, which I feel like sometimes with the Booker, some of the books, weirdly a bit like that one that won that year, kind of fade from memory, and then some have real staying power. And I feel like Empire of the Sun is very much considered a modern classic. It follows a young boy who gets separated from his parents during the Japanese invasion of Shanghai. And I remember really liking it at the time that I read it, which was probably the mid-2010s. So a decent time ago. At the time, I hadn't read many of the books that were focused on what was happening in Asia during the World War, because as someone who grew up in the UK, a huge amount of my knowledge and understanding and the books that I'd read of World War II was the European part of World War II. So I remember liking it for that, but can't remember too much more about it. Then 1985, the winner was The Bone People by Carrie Hulme, which I haven't read. However, have read again one of the shortlistees, and this is by one of my favorite authors actually, who I don't think I talk about very often on this channel because I haven't read a book by her recently, and that's Doris Lessing. This is The Good Terrorist by Doris Lessing. Doris Lessing is one of my favorite authors for like political fiction. I think she blends really complex, almost always female protagonist characters who are rooted in political action, or sometimes political inaction. But she's a great writer, and I really like her writing. This follows is set in London and follows a kind of left-wing commune who become I was going to say embroiled, but they don't become embroiled. They decide to take some pretty controversial approaches to getting their message across. I don't think that will come as a massive surprise. The title of the book is The Good Terrorist, and they do build towards acts of terror, and it's an almost exclusively white cast of characters. I think it's quite an interesting way of exploring the ideas behind terrorism in a way that isn't often done in literature with a kind of like a white cast of characters, because like spoiler, white people can be terrorists too. And yeah, I really liked it. It's not my favorite Doris Lessing book, but I did really like it. Next we have 1986 was won by The Old Devils by Kingsley Amis. Now, I've not read any Kingsley Amis, but I'm a big fan of Martin Amis. But a couple of books that I have read on the shortlist: The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I mean, do I need to say anything about The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood? I can't believe it didn't win. I'm really interested actually to read The Old Devils by Kingsley Amis, because I'm like, what beat Handmaid's Tale? And then also that year was An Artist of the Floating World by Kazuo Ishiguro, which is not one of my favourite Ishiguro novels. I certainly can't remember anything about it, but I think that's partly because I read and loved Never Let Me Go and The Remains of the Day really close together, and then went on a bit of an Ishiguro binge, and I read An Artist of the Floating World and A Pale View of Hills really close together, and I cannot distinguish the two books in my head, and that's a me problem. But that was that year. 1987, I've got nothing. 1988, okay, so 1988 was the year that The Satanic Verses was nominated, was shortlisted, didn't win. A Peter Carey book won Oscar and Lucinda. I think The Satanic Verses is an absolute masterpiece, and for what you if you haven't read it, for what you hear about it, because obviously made quite an impact, it was the book that resulted in Salman Rushdie having the fatwa placed on him. What's the right verb for that? But it was the book that resulted in the fatwa on Salman Rushdie. I think it's a masterpiece. I really recommend it. I think if you haven't read it, it is one of those kind of books in the cultural zeitgeist that I think people should read. It's not perfect. There are parts of it that I think definitely, with a kind of like modern contemporary sensibility, might not chime so well, but I think it's like, you gotta read it. The next year, 1989, we're getting close to the time in which I was born, so that's nice. The winner was The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro, which I have already mentioned as being an Ishiguro book that I loved. This is set in England. It follows a butler who has lived his whole life in service and is very wedded to this idea, extremely uptight and British, and just a desperately sad, quiet book. Really recommend it. I think it's wonderful. Then 1990, my year of birth. Haven't read any of them. 1991. Okay, so 1991, haven't read The Winner, which was The Famished Road by Ben Ockery, but I have read Time's Arrow by Martin Amis. I've already mentioned Martin Amis. This is a cool book. I lent this to my cousin Chris about 13 years ago, and he never gave it back to me, which I wouldn't mind, except I'm pretty sure he never read it. Chris, if you're watching this, where's my book? This is the story, I don't know, oh my God, I don't know how to spoiler it, but it's essentially a man living his life in reverse. So like, imagine someone's life rewound. It's that. It's quite a short book. It's dealing with big themes that, if you're familiar with Martin Amis's writing, are not surprising themes, but I don't want to touch on exactly what it's about because I do think it is spoilery. I cannot remember, if you know going into it, who this person is. But I really liked it. I think it was the first Martin Amis book that I read, and yeah, I was a big fan. That was all I read that year. 1992 is the year that The English Patient was a joint winner. So by Michael Ondaatje, was a joint winner with Barry Unsworth by Sacred Hunger. The English Patient, I think, is another one of these books that has really kind of lasted in the zeitgeist. I can't remember which historical period it's set in, but it is, which war is it? I can't remember, but you've probably heard of this book. You don't need me to talk about this book, right? I remember really liking it, but again, I haven't read it since I think I was about 16 or 17, so it's been a minute. The next year, 1993, I haven't read anything on this list, but I do have the winner, which is Paddy Clark, Ha 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 by Roddy Doyle, on the shelf down below. Roddy Doyle is an author that I keep meaning to read. I have been slowly collecting books by him, despite having never read him. And this is the one that I most want to read, because I think this explores like young male friendship, which I'm very interested in. But have nothing further to say about it because I haven't read it. 1994. I've got nothing. No, nothing. 1995, we have the winner was The Ghost Road, which, okay, I haven't read, by Pat Barker, sorry. I haven't read The Ghost Road, but I have it downstairs on my special little Northeast shelf, because Pat Barker is an author from County Durham, which I count as being the Northeast as an extension of where I live. So I have a little, because that's where I live, the region of England that I live in. And a few years ago, I realised I hadn't read that. I wasn't reading that many local to me authors. And so I separate all of the books that are written by Northeast authors and I have them all on my piano. Now, I have The Ghost Road down there. I haven't read it. It's the third book in a trilogy. I have read Regeneration, which is the first, and I have read The Eye in the Door, which is the second, and I really liked them both. I don't know why I haven't read The Ghost Road yet, but it is following, it's set during the war, and we're mostly based in a sanatorium, I think, where a lot of conscientious objectors and soldiers who were suffering with shell shock were housed. It features Siegfried Sassoon as a central character. I can't remember if he appears in more than one of the books, but it's looking at war. It's looking at the growing field of psychiatry. Pat Barker's a really great writer. I really liked it. Don't know why I never finished the trilogy, but I plan to. Then 1996, we have the winner was it was another Graham Swift book, Last Orders. So maybe that needs to be next on my Graham Swift list. But I have read from the shortlist Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood. Again, I feel like she's such a known author. I probably don't need to talk about it. There was that Netflix adaptation that I didn't see, but I think was quite popular a number of years ago. This is following a woman who, is she in prison for murder? I can't remember, but she's definitely a woman in prison and she's a very unreliable narrator and plot happens. I remember liking it, but it's not my favourite Atwood, I don't think. Then we have 1997. I have not read any of them. However, the winner was The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy, which if you have seen the video, which will have been up on my channel last week, I tried the first chapter of The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy and really liked it. So this is one that I am planning on getting to soon, but I haven't read yet. 1998, nothing. I've got nothing. An Ian McEwan book one, Amsterdam. I've read a lot of Ian McEwan, but I haven't read that one. Then 1999, no, nothing. James Coetzee won again with Disgrace. I don't think I've read Disgrace. I've read a few Coetzee books and I know he's a pretty beloved author and he's very decorated. He's won a lot of prizes. But I don't find that his books ever quite have the lasting impression that I feel like they should have, but that's probably a me thing. Oh, she's gonna sneeze. Is she? I think we've moved past it. Never mind. 1999 is the one that I just did. Yeah. Don't have anything else to say. Oh, this is the first appearance. I didn't know Andrew O'Hagan was nominated all the way back in 1999 for a book called Our Fathers. I've only read Mayflies by Andrew O'Hagan, and I absolutely loved it. 2000, Margaret Atwood won for The Blind Assassin. Now, I haven't read this since I was 16, but in my head, this is my favourite Margaret Atwood book. But I haven't read it since I was 16, so like, don't hold me to that. I remember nothing. I think it's got like a 3-tiered narrative. So it's like a book within a book within a book. I think it definitely, or at least it has 3, I think, very distinct plots happening in. But oh my god. I mean, it's been more than 16 years since I read this book, so honestly, I don't know. Maybe I should reread it. But also, we got another Kazuo Ishiguro, actually one that I haven't read, When We Were Orphans. So let me know if you've read that. English Passengers by Matthew Neal. It was shortlisted in 2000, and again in that Try a Chapter video. This was one of the ones that I liked the most. I listened to the first bit of this. I think it follows a number of, it's following a ship that is, I think it's like the 1850s or 1860s, and this ship is going from the UK to Tasmania in Australia, and I think we're following all of the... Oh, my brother is calling me. I'll call him back. We're following all of the different passengers on board that ship. So I think the different chapters are following different characters, or at least that's the vibe that I got from the first bit. That's all I know. I haven't read any more. Then 2001, the winner was Peter Carey with the True History of the Kelly Gang. I have read this book. I really, really liked this book. It is a sort of pseudo true story, looking at Ned Kelly and where he came from, but it's told through these different sort of artifacts. And I think it's Ned Kelly in his own words, as if he'd written this diary, or this, was it a letter to his daughter? She can't remember the details, but I remember really liking it. I listened to the audiobook and really enjoyed it. Also shortlisted this year was Atonement by Ian McEwan. Very famous book, I think probably his most famous book, really, which I really, really like. We've got a David Mitchell that I haven't read, Number 9 Dream, and an Ali Smith book, first appearance for Ali Smith with Hotel World, which I have read. It's more like interconnected short stories than some of Ali Smith's other books, but I remember liking it. It's not my favourite Ali Smith, but I do think it's one that isn't spoken about as much as like The Accidental, The Seasonal Quartet, or How to Be Both. I really like it, but I will never not recommend an Ali Smith book, so take that with a pinch of salt. Then we have 2003. The winner was Vernon God Little by DBC Pierre, which again I haven't read but is on my shelf downstairs. I know nothing about it. We have Brick Lane by Monica Ali was shortlisted, which I have read and really, really liked. I can't remember too much about it. I think it's a woman who moves to the UK following an arranged marriage, and it's just kind of like following her, but I remember really enjoying it. I actually have a really vivid memory of sitting on the floor down there and finishing reading it. So I feel like that's always a sign of a good book, if you can remember where you were when you were reading it, even if that was really innocuously just the floor of my spare room. Then we have also that year Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood, which is a kind of climate fiction dystopian book. I feel like it's not my favorite flavour of Atwood, but I enjoyed it. And Notes on a Scandal by Zoe Heller, which I absolutely loved. So that was a strong year. So I'm really interested in reading Vernon Godlittle now, actually, because that beat out some really good books. Then in 2004, we have, the winner was The Line of Beauty by Alan Hollinghurst, which I nearly read recently. I got it out as an ebook from the library and then I just didn't get a chance to read it. I was busy. But I do want to get to that one, but I haven't read it yet. And then shortlisted was Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell, which is another one of those ones that's really lasted the test of time. I remember almost nothing about Cloud Atlas except being so impressed at the imagination of it. And it's, to this day, the only David Mitchell book that I've read, despite owning at least 2 more of his titles. And I think all of his books, has he got like a multiverse thing happening where all of his books connect, or did I make that up? I might have made that up. And Colm Toybeen was also nominated that year for The Master, which I haven't read, so I don't know why I pointed that one out. Then 2005, we have The Sea by John Banville, which I have read. Irish book, really sad. Remember really liking it. It's possibly got a mystery and possibly got grief. Never Let Me Go was on the shortlist by Kazuo Shiguro, which I adore. I love that book so much. I feel like I don't need to talk to you about Never Let Me Go. On Beauty by Zadie Smith, which is my favourite Zadie Smith book of the ones that I have read. I know people talk about White Teeth a lot. I liked White Teeth. I loved On Beauty. I think it did complex family relationships so brilliantly. And then The Accidental by Ali Smith, which is an Acorn alley for me. I have not read, despite her being my favourite author. Can you hear my dog playing downstairs? Don't worry about it. Despite her being my favourite author, I haven't read everything that she's written because I like to keep some things in reserve. And I know The Accidental is like one of her most famous books, but I haven't read that one yet. Then we have 2006. None of them. I've read none of them. But I have recently read my first Hisham Mater, because that was My Friends was nominated this year, and he was shortlisted for In the Country of Men. It was won by The Inheritance of Loss by Kiran Desai, which I've not read. There was a Sarah Waters shortlisted, The Night Watch, but I've not read that one. 2007, again, nothing. Lots of books I've heard of, though, lots of authors I've heard of. It was won by Anne Enright for The Gathering. Haven't read any Anne Enright, though I do have The Wren downstairs. Darkmans by Nicola Barker was shortlisted, which is a beast of a book that I bought recently. The Reluctant Fundamentalist, which is a book that I think a lot of people have read, by Mohsen Hamid. Ian McEwan, Mr. Pitt by Lloyd Jones. Lots of books I've heard of, but none of them I've read. 2008 was won by The White Tiger by Aravinda Diga, which I have read and really liked, actually. I think did I read this in one of the very first reading vlogs I ever put on my channel, which I'll try and remember to link down below. But yeah, really enjoyed that one. Sort of a kind of a rags to riches story. It's set in India. It's got a lot of plot and intrigue and crime in it. Really liked it. What else? 2009 was Wolf Hall, which I have read and absolutely loved. I haven't read the other 2 in the series. I know they're going to crop up soon. But I have read Wolf Hall and really enjoyed it. I'll be rereading it at some point because I need to. I really want to read the other 2, but I've left it too long between finishing Wolf Hall and starting, what's the second book called? Bring Up the Bodies. But loved it. Yeah, what do you say about Hilary Mantel? She's a titan. I also have The Little Stranger, I think I have that downstairs, by Sarah Waters, and the children's book by A.S. Byatt. That's downstairs too, but I haven't read it. 2010, then we have, it was won by The Finkler Question by Howard Jacobson, which I have not read. Room by Emma Donoghue, brilliant book. I feel like I don't have to say much about Room. I think it's a really well-known book, and unusually I've read more Emma Donoghue since reading Room, and I can now appreciate how much of a departure Room kind of was from her main style of fiction, and I really liked it, but I actually don't think I liked it as much as I enjoy her historical fiction. Hi. Then what else? The Long Song by Andrea Levy I have read, really enjoyed that, but can't remember that much about it. And there's a Damon Galgut, which I've got on my shelf downstairs, but haven't read. Then we have 2011, nothing. I have nothing. It was one by a Julian Barnes book. I still haven't read any Julian Barnes. Oh no, sorry, I have read one of the shortlisted books, Pigeon English by Stephen Kellman, which is a brilliant book set in London following a young boy, or possibly more than one young character, that's kind of looking at sort of inner city crime in a really interesting way. 2012, Hilary Mantel, Bring Up the Bodies, which I have already said I haven't read. Then 2013, we've got The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton, which I have read and really loved. I remember reading this like around the time it won the Booker. I think it was probably the first year that I really started paying attention to the Booker Prize, which in theory means we will have some more books to talk about, but I don't know. And I haven't read any of the other shortlisted books for that year. 2014, we've got, the winner was The Narrow Road to the Deep North by Richard Flanagan, which I own but have not read. But Ali Smith's How to Be Both was shortlisted that year, and that is my favourite Ali Smith book. It's told in two halves. It's actually published in two different ways. So there's a contemporary story and then a historical story, and they interconnect, but half of the books were published historical then contemporary, and half were published contemporary then historical. So depending on the version you get, it colours how you engage with those stories, and I thought it was brilliant. Sounds like it could be gimmicky, but I thought it worked really, really well. Then we have A Brief History of Seven Killings in 2015. That was the winner. I remember really liking this book. I remember a lot of people wanted other books to win from that shortlist, but I thought A Brief History of Seven Killings was amazing. It follows Bob Marley, but it's it's kind of told around him, and I thought it was brilliant. I've also read A Spool of Blue Thread by Anne Tyler, which is the only Anne Tyler book that I have read, and I liked it, but I didn't love it. Also shortlisted was A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, which I don't think I'm ever going to read. I just don't think I am. Then how are we doing for time? Do you know what? We're taking quite a long time, aren't we? Should we get to... I'll stop when we get to 2020, because I feel like I haven't had my channel since 2020, but I feel like I've got less to say about some of the more recent ones, because I'm more likely to have read them more recently. 2016, I haven't read the winner, which was The Sellout by Paul Beatty, but I have read His Bloody Project by Graham McRae Burnett, which is a brilliant sort of a bit like The True History of the Kelly Gang, like pseudo-factual fiction, historical fiction set in Scotland. Loved it. I have a video where I talk about it with my friend Farmer, because we both read that book. I've also read Eileen by Atessa Moshfegh, which I really, really liked. I think if you like Atessa Moshfegh, that's the best Atessa Moshfegh. But if you don't like her, it just won't work for you. And I really don't think there is a way of telling if she's for you or not. You just got to read her. Then 2017 was one by Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders, which I think is still one of the most imaginative, most impactful books I have ever read. will she say that? She will. It is this it reads almost like a radio play. It's very kind of formally experimental. But we are following Abraham Lincoln in the period after his son has died. But there's this whole cast of almost like ghostly characters. It's very unusual. Really recommend it. 4321 by Paul Auster was shortlisted. And I read that first and then thought, how could anything beat this book? And then read Lincoln in the Bardo and was like, oh, because I really liked 4321. Lots of people didn't, but Paul Auster is one of my favorite authors. I really like his books, and I really enjoyed that. Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. Really liked this. Really imaginative take on migration and asylum. Really thought it was like a little bit magic realism-y. Liked it. Not my favorite book on the list, but liked it. And Autumn by Ali Smith. I mean, it's Ali Smith. I have a whole video where I read Autumn, so you can go check that out if you like. Then 2018, we've got Milkman by Anna Burns, which I haven't read but really want to. We've got nothing else that I've read. The Overstory by Richard Powers, I haven't read. No, none of those. Then 2019 is the year that Margaret Atwood and Bernardine Evaristo both won. Margaret Atwood for The Testaments and Bernardine Evaristo for Girl, Woman, Other. I really liked Girl, Woman, Other, but not as much as I liked Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo. It's a series of interconnected narratives, all exploring various elements of womanhood, and particularly the experiences of women of colour, which I really liked, but it wasn't. It was a little too spread out for me. I prefer a slightly more focused narrative. I do think it's a bit of a joke that The Testaments by Margaret Atwood won. That's a book that I really don't think needed to be written, let alone win the Booker Prize, but never mind. And I didn't really like 10 minutes, 38 seconds in This Strange World by Elif Shafak either. The Elif Shafak in a video, certainly this year, which if I remember to do these links, I will link in the description box down below. And then 2020, we have Shuggy Bane. Oh, this is a good one to finish on. I love Shuggy Bane by Douglas Stewart. This was a debut novel, Scottish novel, following a young boy called Shuggy, and I absolutely loved it. Really lyrical, really raw, really beautiful. And that is the only book that I have read from that list, and that takes us into the 2020s. And you know what? Let's leave it there, shall we? Because I have to pack my bags, and I've been talking for longer than I intended to be talking. So I'm gonna love you and leave you. I hope you've sort of enjoyed this weird rattle through the Booker Prize. I would love to know what you have read from the various years of the Booker Prize, particularly if you've read any from those early years of the Booker Prize, any of the books from the 70s or 80s that I'm pretty patchy there. And if you're interested in Booker content and you haven't come across Bob the Bookerer, he does this far more eloquently and far more thoroughly than I do. He's kind of on a reading journey to read all of the books that I think have been shortlisted for the Booker. So if you've enjoyed this but you wanted it to have far more substance, I recommend Bob the Bookerer. And hey, I don't think I will be doing another one of these videos, but maybe I will. If you've enjoyed it though, do give me a little thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. And I think probably the next thing that will be on my channel will either be an October reading wrap up, if I have indeed managed to read any books in October, or it might be some footage from Japan. Who knows? But yeah, if you haven't subscribed to my channel and you wanna, that would be fun. I normally put a tiny bit more thought into these videos than this one. I will have linked the Wikipedia article down below so that you can have a look at these books at your leisure. I'm sorry that there won't have been covers and things like that. I just really don't think I will have time to edit them all in. And yeah, Thanks for hanging out with me, gang. See you later.